Hello, good evening, everybody. It's 6:30. My name's Lawrence Walsh. I'm the chair of the Planning Committee. On my left are senior planning officers. On my right is Councillor Aidan Williams, the vice chair. On my further right are officers from Legal, Highways and Democratic Services. Down both legs of the table are members of council who make up this planning committee. You're all very welcome this evening, including the giraffe. Have we got any apologies for this evening, please? With apologies from Councillor Evans.
Okay. Councillor Evans sent this apology. I believe we did have a substitute, but it looks like there may be a problem with the substitute. So unfortunately, we are one down. Yes.
Councillor Riley, I think he's substituting tonight. If he comes, he's perhaps he's just late. Perhaps he's just late. Okay. And I've got two apologies from Councillor Malik and Councillor Longden. Councillor Jane Dillon is substituting tonight for one of those members. Thank you very much. We start if the fire alarm or continuous siren sounds, please could I ask that you leave the building in a calm manner by the nearest fire exit by proceeding left out of the room and down the main stairwell and out of the main civic entrance, which is opposite. Everyone should assemble at the front of the town hall and must not re-enter the building until instructed to do so. If you have a disability which could affect your means of escape, could you please inform a member of staff so that arrangements can be made for your safe evacuation? And we've got some broadcast information as well. Please be aware that this meeting will be recorded for live and for subsequent broadcast on the council's YouTube channel. The whole of the meeting will be recorded, except where there are confidential or exempt items. This activity promotes democratic engagement in accordance with Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972. The cameras will focus on the proceedings of the meeting and avoid areas specifically designated for members of the public. If you object to being filmed, please remain seated in the public seating area. All members and officers must use the microphones provided to enable the audio to be picked up by the system. Members are reminded to turn off their microphones when they are not formally addressing the committee. Okay. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Have any members got any interest to declare on any agenda items this evening? No? Okay, that's fine. Questions from members of the public? I think Ms. Coley, our Senior Planning Officer, is going to give us some advice on questions from the public. Ms. Coley.
Thank you, Chairman. A communication has been received which was expressed as a question. Members have been asked to reconsider a previous resolution made by the committee. This relates to planning application 9578/FUL/18, which members were minded to refuse at their meeting of the 14th of March. This request was made by an individual seeking to use the procedure for questions to executive and committees. However, this is not an appropriate use of that procedure as it is a request rather than a question. It would require members to revisit a matter that they have already considered and determined. It would require members to debate and pass a resolution. This is beyond the remit of public questions. Officers have already advised that the extent of alterations proposed to the scheme would require a separate planning application, and it is not appropriate to ask members to take a different view on what is a matter for officers. And there are alternative and appropriate procedures to challenge the council's decision to refuse a planning application by way of an appeal to the Planning Inspectorate. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Item number 4 is additional information report. There are copies around. I hope members of the public have had a chance to read them. I know members of Planning Committee have had those. Item 5 is a note from myself. Just a quick reminder to members of the Planning Committee, myself included, that as well as our local knowledge, we look to our local development plan and other background papers listed at the beginning of agenda item 5 as a basis for our decision making this evening. So we'll go to agenda item 5, that's applications to develop, and we'll begin with page 25, that's the former B&Q site, Greatstone Road, Stretford. And we have a number of speakers on this item, and we normally take the speakers for, I think, or rather against the item first. We have Councillor Jarman and we have Mr. Stephen Webster. Mr. Webster, would you?
No, Chairman, he's speaking in favour of the application.
You're speaking in favour of rather. Apologies for that. Mr. Daniel Gidney. I would do Mr. Gidney. Mr. Gidney would like to take a seat.
Introduction, Chairman.
Yep. If you'd like to take your seat, you have 3 minutes, Mr. Gidney. But before you do, Miss Cole is going to give us some advice. Miss Cole, or rather, Mr. Pearson's going to give us some advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's just an introduction to. It's not intended to be a summary of the report before members, but rather a brief overview of the proposals, the officer recommendation, and matters that have arisen since the publication of the main agenda. Outline planning permission is sought for the redevelopment of the site to create 433 apartments and 1,181 square metres of commercial floor space in a single building, 99 metres wide and 65 metres deep, and which ranges in height from 4 to 13 stories. Permission is sought for scale, layout, appearance and access. Landscaping is the seven of which relate directly to the height, scale, layout, density and mass of the proposed building and the adverse impact it will have on its surroundings, existing and future residents, designated heritage assets and Lancashire Cricket Club as a non-designated heritage asset and cultural and visitor attraction. A further reason for refusal relates to the failure of the applicant to demonstrate through a robust viability assessment that the scheme could support a policy-compliant level of developer contributions. A final reason for refusal relates to the lack of dedicated car parking for the commercial units and the harm to highway and pedestrian safety that it is considered would arise. Members' attention is drawn to the additional information report, which sets out a number of updated issues. In particular, the applicant has increased their affordable housing offer from 5% to 10%, but without any consequent update to their viability assessment. The applicant has submitted amended plans showing an increased level of resident and visitor cycle parking. Updated consultation responses have been received from the local highway authority, Trafford Clinical Commissioning Group, the Council's Heritage Development Officer, and the Council's Strategic Planning Team. Officers are aware that members have had information sent to them by way of lobbying, which has not been submitted as further information for consideration by officers. This included a rebuttal statement of the reasons for refusal, which is responded to in the additional information report. Inconsistencies and errors in the main report have been corrected, and it has been updated in respect of developer contributions, appearance, highways issues, and the planning balance. Reasons for refusal number 2 and 9 have been updated to reflect consultation comments and the amended plans. However, none of these issues alter officers' conclusion, which is that the proposals fail both the tests in paragraph 11D of the MPPF, which is engaged given that some policies in the development plan are out of date. In respect of 11D1, there is a clear reason for refusal of the scheme in that the less than substantial harm, which has been identified to heritage assets, is not outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme. This alone would point to the development being unacceptable. However, officers have gone on to undertake the test in respect of 11D2, and weighing all harms and benefits in the planning balance, it has been concluded that the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mr. Gidney, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Start again. I'd like to thank the committee for giving us an opportunity to speak this evening in support of our objection. As CEO of Lancashire Cricket...
Just bear with me, Mr. Gidney. The gentleman with the picture, it's not normal practice to show a picture up, sir. Could you return to your seat? You're welcome to pass it round to the members.
No, Chairman, no.
Okay, we're not allowed to pass the picture around either. Thank you. For the third time, Mr. Gidney, you have 3 minutes. Please start again.
Yeah. I'd like to thank the committee for giving us an opportunity to speak tonight in support of our objection. As CEO of Lancashire Cricket, with other colleagues that I've mentioned, including England and Lancashire batsman Keaton Jennings and Lanky and others, we feel really passionately that this application is inappropriate. We've redeveloped the ground over the past 10 years with over £60 million worth of investment, impossible without Trafford support, including a new hotel that created 76 permanent local jobs. We're a community and benefit society. All of our surpluses are reinvested in community, people and facilities. And our future vision is to protect and provide the best cricket experience in the world, both as a world-class venue and as a non-designated heritage asset. The next 6 years of international matches include an Ashes Test and a World Cup later this year, which collectively over 6 years is worth 114 million to the local economy in terms of visitors coming and spending money. This proposal is detrimental to the future of Lancashire cricket for the following reasons. The residential development is unacceptable in terms of its scale and massing. In particular, it's out of keeping with the street scene. No other commercial building in the immediate vicinity is more than 6 stories, and it's surrounded by 2-story residences. It conflicts with existing development plan policy and the emerging residential development of this scale adjacent to the cricket ground will create an overbearing and overly dominant development which will harm the international significance to the cricket ground as a global venue and potentially put test matches and the visitors and their economic spend that come with them to the area at risk. In addition to this, the noise assessment submitted by the applicant accepts that concert noise can't be mitigated, but they've assumed only 1 to 2 concerts a year. In fact, legally, up to 7 concerts a year can be held, in addition to full capacity at international cricket and loud music for 2020 and the new 100 ball game. That means that there's potentially over 20 days a year that can have significant noise disturbance for residents who are living that close to the cricket ground. The application takes no account for these impacts. National planning policy advises that new development should be integrated effectively with existing businesses and community facilities, and that businesses should not have unreasonable restrictions placed on them as a result of development being permitted after they've been established. And finally, it's clear that permitting this development will be detrimental and will cause harm to Lancashire cricket in the future. You can tell that collectively, we're really worried about this. And we submit that such a situation is wholly unacceptable at 13 stories and should not be allowed to happen. We believe this development is inappropriate in terms of its location, its scale, and its massing, and would respectfully request that it is refused. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gidney. If you'd like to. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We have a long meeting this evening, and we haven't really got time for applause. Councillor Jarman, you'd like to take a seat? And you're a local ward councillor, and you have 5 minutes, Councillor Jarman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Probably won't need 5 minutes. Yeah, thanks for letting me speak. I'm speaking against this application, not only as a local councillor, but also as a resident of Gorse Crescent who recently received the re-notification letter. A few residents have contacted me, either in person, by phone, or by email, to express their opposition to this development. To put it in context, I'm in favour of a residential development on this site, but only if it's the correct proposal, and I'm afraid this one isn't it. I support Trafford's contribution to the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework and its brownfield first policy, and I also support the principle of the Civic Water Master Plan in this area. There are lots of things not right about this particular application, as evidenced in the report. My main objection is the height and density of the proposed application. It's far too dense. 433 dwellings split between 1, 2 and 3 bed accommodation is too dense for what is really a relatively small footprint of this site. But the main concern is the height, ranging from Well, originally it was 5, but according to the amended information from the planning officer, it's now 4. 4 stories facing Great Stone Road and the 13 stories at the rear of the site adjacent to the cricket ground. This will literally tower over the surrounding area and impose a significant loss of amenity, not least to the residential properties that surround it on 3 sides, basically. The maximum height recommended for that area in the master plan is 6 stories, which is the same height as the 4 cricketer blocks on Talbot Road, the hotel, the point, and in fact all the buildings around the cricket ground. None of them exceed 6 stories. And obviously the residential properties which surround it on for most of its perimeter are only 2 stories. There are many reasons to refuse as outlined in the recommendation, not least the poor design aspects and lack of proposed affordable housing by the applicant. I'm confident you will go with the recommendation of the planning officers to refuse this application. Let's hope that a future proposal comes forward, whether by this developer or somebody else.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Now, speaking against the application, we have Mr. Stephen Webster. Mr. Webster, if you'd like to take a seat. And you have 3 minutes, Mr. Webster.
Sorry, I thought it was on. I'm speaking for the application, yeah. My name is Stephen Webster. I'm chairman of Accrued Capital. We're the owners of the site in conjunction with Prudential Global Investment Managers, who are one of the biggest fund managers in the world, look after most pension funds. We bought the site in 15, actually. B&Q were here. They surrendered their lease in 16. It just didn't work for them. Since then, we've been trying to work up a scheme for residential. That's why we bought it, because it's a brownfield site. It's allocated for residential. We started off with a tower, which was 684 dwellings. The first point of call was to see Lancashire Cricket Club. We saw Daniel Gidney and David Hodgkiss, and we got on quite well, actually. And having discussions with them and discussions with the planning authority, it was pretty well clear that that was going to be too large. So we reduced the scheme. We went out for public consultation. We had 3 weeks of public consultation, overwhelming support in the consultation for our proposals. We then submitted a planning application, and I think there were 10 objections in total. I think there were 2 periods of consultation. In fact, our application was validated, then it was unvalidated. We've had, to be honest with you, for about 1.5 years now, we've been having dialogue of sorts with the planning authority, but it has been a little difficult because during that process, Trafford Council have been trying to acquire the site from us. We have been assured that the planning authority are looking at this simply in planning terms, but contemporaneously, Trafford Council have been trying to buy the site. Anyway, what are we trying to do? We are trying to build 433 flats, as been mentioned, for rent. This is build to rent. Our partners, PGIM, that's short for Prudential Global Investment Managers, and you can understand why, believe in building flats for rent on a long-term basis for people, where people have got flexibility. They can move from 1 bed to 2 bed to 3 bed. They can have 3-year leases if they want. And the rents will only go up by inflation, no more. It'll be a well-managed, seriously, professionally managed development for all sorts of people. People who can't afford to buy, people who are still saving for their deposit. We know it's a brownfield site. We've said that so many times. Trafford desperately needs houses and desperately needs houses to rent. These houses are going to be occupied 365 flats, rather, 365 days a year. I would never do anything to harm Lancashire Cricket Ground. I was born a mile and a half away. I came here when I was 12, and I would never do anything that would prejudice Old Trafford Cricket Club, which, of course, I just might say is not open 365 days a year. It's only open for 5 months of the year, as it happens. So what comes first? If there's no harm done, I would say you have to go with supporting this application to build more homes where people want it. The housing allocation is not really well met at the moment. if you do this, you will probably say 50 acres of greenbelt, and that's not to be sniffed at these days, to be honest with you. We've rebutted all of the objections. So much, sorry? Yes, indeed. I won't go into it. We've rebutted all of the objections, and you have that, so I won't go into that. But just to say that, in fact, this will not be an overbearing development. It does not impact on daylighting on the pitch. In fact, the point does more than that, as it happens. It's going to be a well-constructed development, well-managed, and we hope you support it. Thank you.
And Councillor Blackburn, is Councillor Blackburn here? Councillor Blackburn, would like to take a seat? And you have 5 minutes, Councillor Blackburn.
Try again. Trafford has thousands of residents who are in need of housing. That is a fact. We have this evening an opportunity to provide some of these homes, real homes for real people. The old B&Q site lies within a couple of minutes from walking time from the tram station, and residents would be able to travel to Manchester, Altrincham, Media City, Oldham, Bury, Rochdale, Ashton, and also to Manchester Airport for work and leisure. There are also regular bus routes nearby. This is a sustainable location, and this produces stronger communities. Within walking distance of the site are supermarkets and also local shops at the quadrant, which, due to increased spending in the locality, would help to protect the retention of local jobs for local people. New residents would have access to the Green Flag Park, Longford Park, which will shortly be undergoing developments. The proximity of this lovely park can be used to help enhance the health and well-being of future new residents. Trafford Council, I believe quite rightly, supports a brownfield first approach to new homes, which will ultimately reduce pressure to build on our green belt. I strongly support brownfield first. Having been born and raised in Old Trafford, I only remember this site as being used by businesses and support the application for homes. This is a landmark development in a landmark area. This is a great area. The opening of the new university campus across the road, which includes a new leisure centre, and the promotion of the civic quarter will bring new life into the M16 and M32 postcodes. New residents will benefit from this. On learning about the planning application, I looked into sites close to other county cricket grounds: Gloucestershire, Bristol, Nottinghamshire, Trentbridge, Somerset, Taunton, and Warwickshire, Edgbaston. These are part of their communities with homes surrounding them. Cricket there is not hampered. I am proud that Lancashire Cricket Club is here. It is part of the community, but communities are its residents. It's all well and good to criticise the development of new homes when you already have one. I support this application to provide homes on this brownfield site and look forward to all our brownfield sites creating much needed homes in our fine borough of Trafford. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. I'd like to return to your seat. Okay, we're going to let members debate this, and Councillor Williams is going to open the debate. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And if I can also just take the opportunity to thank Councillors Blackburn, Jarman and Misters Gidney and Webster for their contributions this evening. I will say from the microphone is on, but I will say from the outset that when I first realised that an application was being brought forward for residential development at the former B&Q site, I felt a real sense of optimism about the opportunity that brought. The site's been dormant for some time now, and frankly, it's been allowed to become quite an eyesore. I feel it will be ideal for a relatively significant residential development in a prime part of Stretford. But having said that, and to be frank, I think the report does acknowledge that the site is suitable for residential development. Paragraph 23 of the report acknowledges that. Having said all of that, my enthusiasm for this application has waned the more that I have come to learn about it, and it's been waning pretty much all week as we've received additional lobbying from the developer that's bringing it forward. it became almost immediately obvious to me when I was reading the report that the application before us represents some of the worst sort of practice that you can get when you come across residential development. My primary area of concern regarding this application is that it simply attempts to cram too many units into too small a site. And in order to accomplish that, the developer is proposing to build towers up into the sky, stacking units on top of one another without any regard as to the proportionality of doing so in the area or the consequential impact that would be made upon the feel of the immediate area. And I think that when I read the report, that was very much confirmed by paragraph 50 of the officer's report. This is all made worse, in my opinion, because of the developer's total disregard for the unique nature of the site, as well as the strategic importance that it holds and the value that the heritage assets located in the immediate vicinity bring to the area. I feel that upon balance and reading the report, I have to agree with the conclusion that's reached in paragraph 7, and which is further built upon in paragraph 67 through to 68, and the summary of the visual impact assessment that was completed. Just on the matter of affordable housing, I was really alarmed when I read the original report by the developer's complete complacency in respect of the affordable housing offer, which I think we all acknowledge is a really important issue for us in the country. And I was alarmed by the fact that the independent assessment of the viability assessment that was submitted as part of the application suggested that far more could be done, actually. And paragraph 35 of the report does refer to that. I welcome the fact that, as it seems to me, pretty much at the 11th hour, the developers decided to double the affordable housing offer to 10%. But frankly, I don't take much reassurance from that 11th hour offer, given that, and this is mentioned in the additional information report, the applicant hasn't submitted a new viability assessment, which sort of leaves me with a feeling that things are being made up as they go along, really. So I will not be supporting the application that's before us this evening. I'll be voting in line with the officer recommendation. I don't think that we should be setting a precedent this evening in allowing a substandard development to be approved contrary to officer recommendation, simply for the sake of building substandard accommodation in a prime residential spot. So I can't find any reason for disagreeing with the reasons that are listed at the end of the report, and I will be proposing that we vote in line with officer recommendation and reject the application.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Hobbs. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I've received extensive lobbying on this issue throughout the last week, and I've had not only have I had letters through the post, I've had lots of emails from residents across the borough, and I went to get my copy of the Altrincham and Sale Messenger today, and there is a RAP also around that, which is against the proposals. I've had lobbying on both sides. I've even been on Facebook this week and had targeted advertising for this development, and the argument that is used is if we build this development, we won't have to build on greenfield land. Now, I can't disagree that we don't need development on brownfield land. We desperately do, and I completely agree with what Mr. Webster says. Trafford does desperately need housing. I cannot disagree that this is a sustainable location. It's right on the Metrolink, it's on the main bus routes, it's on a main road. It's in quite a densely populated area anyway. What I do have a problem is the sheer size of this development, and that's what really, really worries me. And just the scale of it, it just seems so big. It seems so out of keeping with the other buildings that are nearby. The office block that's nearby, I think, is about 6 or 7 stories. This would be 13 stories high. So this is considerably higher. It appears that an attempt has been made to put as much housing on the smallest piece of land possible. And I get that from a developer's point of view. Obviously, it needs to be viable, it needs to be profitable. But this proposal, from my point of view, I agree with the Vice Chair that this proposal is just too much. Yes, there is high rise in the area, but this is just too over dominant, and it just doesn't really fit in with the area. One thing that concerns me too is, on this committee, we talk a lot about the impact on current residents, on people, on neighbours, etc., etc. Well, one thing that this report does outline on page 71, paragraph 189, it looks at future residents, and it talks about future residents who will live in this building. And it says that it's clear that future residents of the units on the lower floors of the proposed development, in particular the first to fifth floors, will be subject to daylight and sunlight levels which are below the guidance levels. And it's considered by the local planning authority that a considerable number of the residents of the proposed development would not benefit from an adequate level of daylight. So even the residents that are going to move in, it's looking an eye on them and saying, well, actually, this isn't an appropriate development for them either, let alone the residents that surround there now. Yes, we do want housing on brownfield land, and I agree with what Councillor Blackburn says. Housing will ensure that the local businesses thrive, and we wouldn't, who wouldn't want to live in this area? There's the regeneration of the civic quarter, there's UA 92 over the road. But this is definitely the right location for housing. But these proposals definitely need scaling back, and I would like to see housing on this site. I just think it should be considerably smaller than the proposals that we are seeing today, and I'm sure the developer could work alongside the planning officers to come up with something that is viable and deliverable and that provides housing on this site, but just not this development. And for those reasons, the proposals as they stand, I certainly can't support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hobbs. Councillor Patel.
Hobbs has said, I think for a scheme of this size in this significant a location, it's quite unusual. That's been in pre-application discussions for so long. It's quite unusual to get a recommendation to refuse. More often than not, it's the opposite. And I accept all the officers' reasons for doing so. It is a poorly designed scheme with many unanswered questions, particularly around the viability of the affordable housing element, parking. There's a question here, they haven't even answered whether roof plant will be placed on top of the building. Brownfield first is the current policy. It's the policy we all promote here on the planning committee, but it's not brownfield development for the sake of it. It's not brownfield development at all costs. That we can't approve poorly designed schemes which have a detrimental impact on the future residents of those schemes and neighbours. I've had a number of emails from residents from across Trafford. I was sat with a colleague today in Sale Moor when he received an unsolicited phone call from someone he didn't know asking them to email the planning committee to support this scheme. A lot of those emails came from residents in Timperley trying to equate a refusal of this scheme with us then going on to approve greenfield development. It's almost like pitting communities against each other. It's unfair and it's not the right approach. Certainly don't appreciate it. I agree. So looking at some of the comments from the independent design review, it's a monolithic residential building which has no comparator in the local area and fails to respond sensitively to the adjacent two-storey dwellings. And this, just on the last point, sort of seems to sum up the lacklustre design approach taken. The front facade, although irregular in appearance, appears thoughtfully composed. The rear and side elevations do not benefit from the same design approach. It's a significant site, a significant development. It needs to be improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Councillor Carey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to everyone who's spoken tonight. It's really interesting to see people's different perspectives and where they're coming from. I want to just start off by saying that I'm going to firstly talk about the fact that I'm a councillor elected for the whole of Trafford, not just from where I'm from, and the problems that we have with the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. I don't think this is about pitting communities against each other. I think it's about talking about the whole of Trafford. The framework at the moment wants to build on more greenbelt land in Trafford than any other area of Greater Manchester. And I believe that the Brownfield First site proposal is the best way forward to help prevent that. This site gives us the opportunity to reduce those impacts. There are a proposal for 6,000 homes in Carrington, 2,500 in Timperley. There is no road structure. There is no drainage. There is no. Some of these plans are based on maybe a Metrolink and maybe high-speed rail too. I'm going to talk now about being a local councillor from Village Ward in Timperley. You know, this 2,500 site here is ginormous. It's going to have a massive impact on the residents there, humongous impact on the residents. As a supporter of green initiatives, for example, we were recently at a climate change committee group with Councillor Coggins. Greater Manchester was then talking explicitly about the plan for Greater Manchester. I think they said by 2038, they want us to become carbon neutral, I think the phrase was. I might have used that wrong. Carrington is a massive carbon store, a massive carbon store. It terrifies me. It literally terrifies me. I will not be voting in line with the officer recommendation this evening. And I think we should be thinking about the whole of Trafford in respect to this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Carey. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to disagree with the majority of speakers who've already spoken from the committee this evening. I'm going to agree with Councillors Blackburn and Carey in relation to the application. I'm also going to particularly with Councillor Carey that this is a matter of a holistic view. We keep talking about a brownfield first policy. Yeah, it never seems to be implemented. We come up with numerous applications that are greenfield, and we're always told, oh, well, that's fine, because there are other reasons as to why the development is required, and that overrules the protection that would otherwise be afforded. A major brownfield application, we then refuse it. In terms of the development itself, and many people speaking about how terrible and ugly the building is, well, I don't think it's as bad as perhaps people have made it out to be. Although I must admit, I do sit here in planning committee on a regular basis being told that a building which I would regard as less than attractive is a stunning piece of modern architecture, and the planning manager constantly points out it's because I have no taste and therefore I don't understand these things. We have a regular conversation about that. But I don't think that this building, compared to many others that we've had in the past, is as bad as is made out. There have been people talking about the fact that all the buildings in the immediate area are 6 stories and no more. Well, that's immediate. If you're looking at the immediately adjacent buildings, then maybe that's the case. But if you look further afield by only a very limited degree, there are many taller buildings in the area that are significantly more than 6 stories tall. And I don't think that this would present the major problem that is being made out to be. I think the reasons for refusal, although they are many and varied, they are not particularly strong, and I feel that they will perhaps be subject to contest when the inevitable appeal goes to the planning inspector, and I think that we would be a very strong case for us losing that appeal if we tried to defend it. This is a brownfield site of some size. Yes, this is a substantial development upon that brownfield site, but as is often pointed out, if we are going to prevent the need to tarmac over huge areas of greenfield in Trafford, such as already been mentioned, the Carrington, future Carrington area and the Timperley Wedge, then we are going to need to start making some serious attempts to carry out brownfield development, and the odd infill development with 2 or 3 houses here and there will simply not cut the mustard when it comes to making significant numbers of brownfield sites. We are going to have to decide as a council, do we really mean it when we say we have a brownfield first policy? So far, Chairman, I hear the words, but I fail to see the action. And this is an example of the action that should be perhaps being carried out. And rather than simply pushing it away to another area, we should be looking to actually take some action, take some firm, positive action that will prevent the need for future development on greenfield sites. As I say, brownfield first. Are those just words, Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor Bunting. Councillor Dr. Barclay.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to have to disagree with my colleague to my left. Brownfield first, yes, when it's appropriate, and yes, when it doesn't impact on local residents, and yes, when it doesn't impact on our really important and significant sporting establishments, and yes, when it doesn't overreach and tower above residents and appear to be completely monolithic and ugly and inappropriate. So yes, of course, we all welcome, everyone around this table will welcome building on brownfield sites, but it just can't be at any price. We have to be logical and thoughtful about it. And I think I have never read a report that has had so many officer reasons for refusal, and I do feel it would be completely inappropriate and negligent of us to approve it tonight. So for all those reasons, I will be supporting officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Barclay. Councillor Wetton.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say that I thought Councillor Blackburn spoke very well and made some very good points to us as a councillor from speaking with Trafford in mind. And clearly, Trafford is a borough that is under great pressure in terms of finding space for thousands of homes, and it's well argued with the sorts of pressures that come into play in that debate. And the equivalent of 50 acres of green belt being concreted over in order to deliver as many homes as a former store, a former concert venue, a former bowling alley, is a high price to pay for that many homes. I feel a bit concerned that I heard a little bit of a mini project fear from some of the representations. And some of them sort of echoed from. I really don't see this proposal threatening the livelihood of the cricket club in any way, shape, or form, and certainly not in some of the ways that was described to us. There were 10 actual objections to a project of this size. I mean, there's more than 10 people in this room who seem to give me the impression that they're opposed to this, but there's 10 actual objections received to the process. And that, I think that's significant. We can learn a lot from the weight of objections. We do as the longer we serve on planning committee, we develop an eye for the content of objections, but clearly weight of objections tells us a lot, and 10 doesn't shout so very much to me on this particular proposal. Councillor Bunting made mention of 6 stories and no more, we're being told, and he made reference to other buildings nearby. I think that through that window we can see an 11-storey building, and I don't think it's dominating anything. I don't think it's massing and over development at all. I think proportionality may be subjective, but I think on the proposal that's before us, the proportions are balanced. People are perhaps more driven by not wanting to see it next to a cricket club rather than not wanting to see it at all. It's going to be flats for rent, we've heard this evening, and that is very important. We've a good or some good social housing providers in this borough, but they can't expand at the rate that rental property is needed at. They certainly, I don't think any of the social housing providers have put forward a scheme with as many properties as this one offers, as many homes as this proposal offers. I know this isn't going to be a social housing project, but it's still going to provide a lot of homes for a lot of people. And we've heard that the affordable housing element has been increased. But I would also suggest that on top of that, the fact that it is offering 1 and 2 bedroom apartments as well as 3 bedroom will mean that there is a lot more of actual cash affordable rental properties involved in this scheme, and that would be important for the borough. Important too would be the boost to the local economy. That many new homes coming in to this area, it would be a huge shot in the arm for local businesses, whether they be big Tesco or the little convenience store. But it all helps. They all employ local people, so an important boost to the local economy. And my final point, Chairman, is that from what we're being told, it's a high caliber investor that's behind this, and that's very important because they look at the long term, and by looking at the long term, that means they look after their asset, and it will be very important for a project of this size to have a long-term view taken of the care of that asset. And I think the fact that there's a high caliber investor behind it would give me a lot of confidence that we wouldn't see problems further down the line. So with those points, Chairman, I have to say that I on this occasion, I can't support the officer's recommendation. I've heard all the technicalities of why we should as a committee be refusing it. But I'm actually looking at 433 homes for people. I'm looking at a brownfield site that's pretty horrible, needs something doing with it. And 433 homes is a fantastic result. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wetton. Councillor Stennett.
Of letters and emails relating to the application. I know that providing housing for the residents of Trafford is very important, especially when it relates to affordable housing, as this application seeks to address. I pass the site very often, both driving and walking, and entering and exiting the site, even when the garden center was there, always posed a number of problems. Of course, it is brownfield land, which means that it is not in conflict with greenbelt land. But based on what has been presented to us this evening, especially in the light that it would create problems for existing properties in terms of parking and its impact on heritage as it relates to the Lancashire Cricket Club and maybe this town hall, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Stennett. Anybody else like to comment? Councillor Coggins.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening very carefully to all the arguments. I agree with a lot of what I heard from Councillor Blackburn and Councillor Carey, that we have a huge need to build in sustainable locations on brownfield sites in order to protect what remains of our green infrastructure. And this is a very sustainable location. But I can see that a reasonably sized residential development could go there. But I will be voting in favour with the officer's recommendation tonight. For a start, the affordable housing, we've heard only tonight that it's been increased from 5% to 10%. For those of you who don't watch planning committee regularly, you know, we get these viability assessments that lay out in enormous detail how much affordable housing can be afforded to be put in. And that information just isn't here. It just seems like we do not have the information to make an assessment that that is enough. The requirement for this area is much bigger. So it just seems like this is, we don't have the information to say that 10% affordable homes is enough here. And similarly, there's a lack of information on the impact on Longford Park Conservation Area, I think it's said at paragraph 335. Worryingly, on paragraph 212, it says there's insufficient information about the the wind impact, the wind microclimate impact, which has road safety implications. So I really feel that I can't vote in favour of something where the officers have told me we don't have enough information to say this is enough affordable housing, and we don't have enough information to say that this is safe on the roads. So while I can see that we could in the future approve a reasonably sized residential scheme here, I'm afraid I can't support this one tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Sorry, I realise I've already spoken. It was just Councillor Bunting's assertion that we routinely approve construction on greenfield sites. As far as I know, in my term on planning committee, we've only ever done that with one dwelling. And Councillor Wetton talking about the number of objections and the weight we should give to that. Well, we don't measure objections in the numbers received. It's the nature of the objections and whether they stand up in planning terms.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Okay, it's been moved that we accept the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. It hasn't been seconded. Councillor Williams proposed it. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Patel? It's been moved and seconded that we go with the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal, please show. And those against? That application has been refused. Thank you, everybody. We're now going to go to page 215. That's High Gables, 98 Bankhall Lane, Hale Barnes. Do we have a Mrs. Lang? Mrs. Lang, if you'd like to take a seat. We'll just let everybody clear, Miss Lang. Just bear with me. Look forward to hearing to what you've got to say. Thank you. Sorry, Miss Lang. Just 1 second.
She hasn't got a microphone on.
That's okay. Yeah, Miss Milner's going to give us some advice before you begin. Just hold fire. Hold fire. Thanks for closing the doors, Councillor Wetton.
Thank you, Chair. So just as an introduction to the scheme, the application relates to a detached dwelling house on the south side of Bankhall Lane, adjacent to the junction with Hilltop. The site is located within the South Hale Conservation Area. Planning permission is sought for the change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a C2 residential a residential home with care, accommodating up to 7 young adults ages 16 to 25. There are no external alterations proposed to the property as part of this application. To support the young adults living on the site, there would be 1 manager and 3 carers present on site daily. A total of 118 objections have been received from 89 addresses within the area, including the submission of an assessment of the application from a highway consultant on behalf of the local residents objecting to the proposal. Objections focus mainly on the lack of on-site parking, impact on the highway network, specifically highway safety, and a change in character of the area from the change of use from a dwelling house to a residential home of care. Concern is also raised about the impact on the conservation area, amenity of residents, along with the suitability of the site for the proposed use and the need of the proposed use. Main consideration from officers is that there would be no harmful impact on the character of the conservation area or the residential nature of the area. Furthermore, we are satisfied that the proposed use would not have a detrimental impact on highway safety within the area and that adequate parking can be accommodated on site to support the development. However, to ensure that that parking is supplied on site, we have proposed an amendment to condition 5, which is outlined in your additional information report, which requests that further details regarding landscaping and on-site parking prior to occupation. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Milner. Mrs. Lang, you have 3 minutes. Thank you. Microphone again, Mrs. Lang.
Am I on? Okay. My name is Nancy Lang and I'm representing our neighbourhood. We're disappointed at the report to this committee because the proposal to grant ignores 114 objections to this application. Indeed, there is no support from our entire community. We support the notion of care in the community. In the design and access statement, the applicant states that residents will be encouraged to integrate into the community. Yet at no time has the applicant attempted to engage with us to understand how this might be realised, which is in conflict with the National Planning Policy Framework advice. Quite simply, this proposal for change of use is in the wrong location and contrary to suggestion within the report, it will impact residential amenity and highway safety. Firstly, dealing with residential amenity. Reference is made to the use of the property being little different to a conventional large family dwelling house, but including care staff, a manager and 7 unrelated residents, there will be 11 people on site. This does not account for the visitors from clinical staff and family visitors. The report acknowledges an intensification of use, and I quote, "It is acknowledged that there will be times when the activity and number of persons on the site increases. Make no mistake, this proposal is for an unacceptable institutional use operated as a commercial business in a residential area, and of course our amenity will adversely be impacted upon." I turn now to highways issues. Curtins, our highways consultant, has advised the Planning Authority that the proposal is considered unacceptable and fails to accord with your relevant policies and principles. Proposed condition 5 commits the applicant to deliver car parking, servicing and vehicular access as the submitted layout prior to first occupation. The submitted layout shows 5 parking spaces, no disabled bays, no dimensions, and indeed details of the driveway layout. Your standards confirm that 5, if not 6 spaces are required, 3 of which being disabled bays. We have submitted dimensions to your officers. It is not possible to accommodate this number of cars on site, and yet the infrequent local bus service means that staff and visitors will largely be car dependent, nor will it be possible to access the site in a forward gear on a very dangerous bend, therefore endangering highway safety. Site modifications could be proposed. However, an application can only be determined on the submitted information. This is currently misleading and fails to provide sufficient information to base the plan. We respectfully ask that the members reconsider the recommendation to grant this application, or at least defer a decision until such time the applicant can provide a detailed site layout to demonstrate that the proposal are in fact deliverable.
Councillor Myers. Councillor Myers, you have 5 minutes, but before you begin to speak, Miss Milner's going to give us some advice. Miss Milner.
It was just to clarify that the condition 5 in the main committee report in the agenda has been updated in your additional information report, so you will see further details requested.
Thank you. Councillor Myers, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There's been over 100 objections to this scheme, and whilst I've been canvassing in the area over the last week or so, I can't find any resident at all who supports it. The applicant has not actually discussed the issue with any local councillors or members of the local community to explain really how this change of use would benefit the local residents. Bankhall Lane and the surrounding area is residential. Number 98 is more than 20 minutes walk from either Hale or Hale Barnes. It's not a suitable location for vulnerable people trying to get their lives back together. In addition to the 11 staff and patients, there would be friends and families visiting the site together with clinical staff and vehicles delivering. The report already identifies this as an issue. Clearly, the sheer number of people on site make the proposed commercialisation very different from a family home. There is insufficient car parking space, and I hear what the officer says tonight, but there's insufficient car parking space, and I doubt whether actually it could be changed at all. It would be unsafe for any vehicle to reverse onto the dangerous bend in Bankhall Lane, which would happen if there's insufficient space to turn the vehicle around on site. The very last weekend, Chairman, there was a very serious accident on this bend, which involved in a car being completely disabled in a front-end collision with another car. It's a very fast road. Based on the information contained in this in the report that put forward, I think it actually the recommendations deviate from the local plan in section L4.7 and L4.8, and also the principles set out in SPD 3. In short, this is the wrong location for this activity in terms of both social cohesion and public safety, and I'd ask the members to reject it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Do we have Miss Amry? Miss Amry, you'd like to take a seat? And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, Chair and Committee, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I think the planning issues have been addressed in the report, so really, for me, I think it's really important that I use this time to explain the service. But first of all, just pick up on a couple of the comments that have just been made in relation to communicating with the neighbours, and that rightly so. I mean, they've said there's been over, I think, 120 objections in relation to this application. And one of the main reason for actually not approaching the neighbours is the hostile nature of some of the objections, the prejudice and discrimination of some of those objections. I'm a clinical nurse specialist. I'm one of the founders of Care in Mind, and we started our journey really in 2009, providing residential placements for young people that had normally been in hospital, and indeed young people that have spent up to 2-3 years in hospital. Eating disorder service is no different. There's an estimate of 4 million young people suffering with an eating disorder in the UK. There was 1,000 admissions to inpatient services last year alone. Arguably, a lot of these young people do not need inpatient services. They need to be treated in the community, and they need to be treated with respect. Hale is a beautiful area. I understand some of the anxieties of the neighbours. I do think a lot of the planning issues have been addressed in the report. We will be good neighbours. We have no intention of doing what operating any other facility in which in our planning application. We will not be taking young people with forensic backgrounds, antisocial behaviour, drug or alcohol use. In actual fact, these young people are physically quite unwell, so they're not going to be caused. If people were allowed their prejudice not to get in the way, I think they would see that would be actually be really good neighbours, and they'd be helping our service realise and meet an incredibly unmet need of young people that are institutionalised because there isn't that care and that in the community. We're doctors, nurses and therapists. We're a professional organisation. We know what we're doing. We've helped a lot of young people. We currently work with 35 young people. This is a very different service, but with the same team, with the same professionalism and the same desire to help these young people to thrive and recover without having to be in hospital. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Hamry, if you'd like to return to your seat. Would any members like to open the debate? Okay, I'll open the debate. As we saw the previous application this evening, people get very worked up about planning applications, and some of the language, some of the terminology I've heard tonight was surprising with the Lancashire application. And can I say, with this application, I can understand neighbours' concerns. I went to view the site on Sunday and saw the state of the road. I was not impressed with the state of the road, but I recognise that that can be a dangerous bend, and I saw speeding traffic myself. Our highways officers have looked at those issues. Not likely, not for 5 minutes. They have spent some time, and they do not have issues with those highways issues. And I mention that because Councillor Myers spoke about an accident, and absolutely, this committee do not want to impose an application that's going to cause an accident at that location. We don't want it in anywhere in the borough. But I say to you, we read these reports at length. I cannot see, I've been on the planning committee for 20 years, I cannot see a planning reason to turn this application down. And we need these services. We may not like them to be living people, you know, with problems, with difficulty living. These are young people. But we do need these services. And I think this is an ideal location. I think the building actually fits that purpose. And we want it to be a family, operating like a family. People have said it's not going to be like a family. 11 strangers living there. We want this establishment to work with the community. And I hear what members of the public have said about not consulting with residents. I would hope that in the future, if this application were passed, I would hope in this future, people would talk to each other as neighbours should talk to each other. I'm going to propose that we grant this application. I can see no planning reason for refusal. I don't know what other members think. I'm interested in what they've got to say, but for me, I will be voting in favour. Thank you. Any other members wish to comment? Councillor Wetton.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, clearly this application has stirred up a lot of passion, particularly with local residents. But I'm in a similar position to yourself that I really can't see, apart from the planning aspects of it, I can't see that it is that it poses such a huge problem for the area. There may well be one or two more movements in vehicles, but to be slightly flippant for a moment, we'd only need a Premier League footballer to buy that house, and he'd probably have 11 cars of his own parking on the driveway there. There are no significant reasons here for this not to go ahead. There's a fantastic non-planning reason for it to go ahead, and that would be the service that it would be providing. So for me, I would have to go with the officer's recommendations on this.
Thank you, Councillor Wetton. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't speak at length on this. All I wanted to say really was that, and I'm trying to be respectful here, I was a bit baffled when I read the report to see the level of objection that it received. So I did come this evening with an open mind and tried to listen to what Mrs. Lang and Councillor Myers had to say, and unfortunately, I'm none the clearer as to the reasons for wanting to refuse the application. I felt as though we had a couple of sort of vague comments. Councillor Myers, I think you said that this was the wrong location for this activity. I just don't really know what that means, to be frank. I know that a lot of the representations of as it stands, it's a 7-bed facility for young people with eating disorders, and I can't see that as generating a huge level of traffic chaos on the roads. That's just my assessment when I look at it. So I note that you've proposed the application. I'm happy to second it, and I will be supporting the officer recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I was also, like the previous speakers, I was very surprised to see that there was 114 letters of objection against what is essentially, in planning terms, the conversion of a 5-bed house into a 7-bed house with no external changes and very few internal changes. Okay, this will be a care facility for younger adults with eating disorders, not a family home. But the maximum number of people on site would be 11 people, 7 of which would be people who are under the care of this facility. With only 4 coming and going regularly, I don't imagine many of the residents of this facility would have cars. And the shift, looking at the shift patterns as well, the shift patterns end early in the morning, later in the evening. I agree with some of the speakers. Councillor Myers said this road is a very dangerous location. That bend is incredibly dangerous, but the movements will be minimal from this facility with early and late shift times, as I've already outlined, and the officers have addressed this in the report. This isn't a nursery, it isn't a new care home, and it's not bigger than the current site. It's the same house, and actually the house is very difficult to see from the road. You go around the corner, you have to literally go up and round and up the drive to see the house. And many of the houses, as Councillor Wetton said, many of the houses in this area are large, and there's lots of movements. If you have big families and such that have several cars, they might have several kids. Or, older kids who are coming and going all the time. I had some concerns about the parking, but they've been addressed in the additional information report. Mention was made by one of the speakers about the people using this facility not being part of the community. Well, very often they are. When I was at university, I lived in my first year with a girl who had anorexia, and she dropped out of university. And she stayed for a year in one of these facilities. And had she not gone to this facility, she would have died. I mean, I saw her the other week, and she's doing great now. But these facilities do have a part in our community. To say that they don't, these people aren't part of our community, is complete nonsense. And I believe the officers have addressed the issues that have been raised by the objectors, and there is no planning reason whatsoever to turn this down. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hobbs. Councillor Coggins.
Thank you, Chair. On balance, I agree with what I'm hearing from other members of the committee, but I just wanted to respond to something Councillor Williams has said, that he didn't understand the objections, and I felt it's important that we recognise what the concerns are. And as someone has already pointed out, the sheer number of objections unfortunately doesn't matter in planning terms. Neither does the strength of the objections. So I think we all recognise how strongly people feel about this, but in planning terms, all that matters is whether it's a valid planning objection, not how strongly we feel about it or how many there are. I mean, what I've heard from the residents is that they feel concerned that their area is changing its character from a residential to an institutional feeling. They're concerned about the road safety issue, which all of us who've been there have seen that junction. We were there as well a few months ago on a neighbouring site. And I think as well, I've also heard that the residents felt misunderstood in a sense that the committee report didn't grasp what they were saying. Having said all that, I still feel that actually the reasons given are not going to be planning reasons that are strong enough to overturn this. As Councillor Hobbs has said, this is something we have a massive need for. The queue for young persons' mental health services is absolutely awful, and I think we really need this facility. But I felt it was important to say that we have heard and understood the issues the residents have raised, but within the confines of planning law, and given the great need we have for this sort of facility to support our young people, I'll be voting in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coggins. Councillor Dillon.
I won't repeat what everybody else has said. I don't see any planning reasons for refusing this, but I just think it's a fantastic thing that we're doing. It's a small amount of young people, really vulnerable young people, and it is, as somebody said over there, it can be life-saving. It can change people's lives. They're very vulnerable, often really poorly, and I just think it's a really positive thing for Trafford.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dr. Barclay.
Thank you, Chairman. I have heard the comment might seem to be very different from what's currently there. Obviously, it's a deeply residential area at the moment. But one of the things I heard from the objectors was that it's going to be like, it's not going to be a residential feel to the building. It's going to be like a business or whatever. But I can absolutely say, having worked in medicine myself, that these facilities, their very purpose is to make people within them and the patients within them feel as if they are within a homely environment. There's not going to be big signs up saying clinic, enter here. It's going to be a home for 7 people who desperately need services. And I do feel it's very much like education, welcoming children now with special educational needs. It enriches everybody within the school to have pupils who have extra needs, because it makes us all responsible and it builds sense of community. And I think over time, perhaps hard to imagine now, but I think over time, that facility will build a sense of community. You will see people going to and fro. It will break down barriers. And I think it's so important that we do welcome this development. There's absolutely no planning reasons not to have it, but there's a very strong moral force behind having it. And I do feel that over time, all the residents' concerns will melt away, and it will be a fantastic facility that we do need it so badly. Children's mental health services are stretched to capacity. Anorexia is a very serious issue. It's very prevalent in our communities. And I think everything that we can do to support it within planning terms should be supported, and I will be supporting this application tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Barclay. Any more comments? It's been moved and seconded that we grant this application. All those in favour of granting, please show. And those against, that is unanimous. The application has been granted. Thank you. We're going to go to page 143. That's Barton Square, Phoenix Way, Trafford Park. Do we have Mr. Nichols? Do we have a Mr. Nichols? Is Mr. Nichols in the building? No. Okay. Before we do that, Ms. Coley is going to give us some advice. Ms. Coley.
Thank you, Chairman. An introduction to this item. This application, which is submitted in full, relates to the site of the existing retail destination of Barton Square, which lies adjacent to the Trafford Centre. Barton Square currently accommodates bulky goods retail floor space. This means that there are restrictions on the types of goods to be sold to prevent occupation by typical high street retailers. There is also some existing leisure floor space. However, in 2013, planning permission was granted to allow for the introduction of Primark. This current application is the next stage in the rebranding of Barton Square. It involves a further uplift in the overall quantum of floor space within the Barton Square building to a total of 36,000 square metres, and a further increase in the amount of retail floor space that would be freed from trading restrictions. Additional leisure floor space and food and beverage floor space is also proposed. The central thrust of planning policies embodied within the NPPF is for such uses to continue to be located within defined town centres in order to strengthen them. Barton Square is, in contrast, an out-of-centre location. When having regard to these policy objectives, any proposal to materially strengthen out-of-centre facilities should be treated with caution. Accordingly, officers appointed an internal retail planning consultant to advise on the implications of this application proposal. The applicant's submitted planning and retail statement has been the focus of analysis in this respect. Objections received on behalf of business interests in Altrincham Town Centre have also been considered, and with further commentary in the additional information report. There are two key tests in the NPPF which apply to an application of this nature: sequential test and the impact test. The officer's conclusion, on balance, is that the application proposal firstly passes a sequential test. In addition, the officer's second conclusion is that there is unlikely to be a significant adverse impact on existing town centres. While some harm may be experienced to existing town centres, it would be below the significant adverse threshold, it has been concluded. On this basis, the application proposal has been found to pass all aspects of the national policy test set out in the NPPF. That being the case, a series of important conditions are recommended, which would assist in defining the scope of the development and which are necessary to protect town centre vitality and viability. The proposal has been found 106 legal agreement and/or a unilateral undertaking and a list of conditions, with some minor adjustments to those provisions as identified in the additional information report. The legal agreement includes a financial contribution towards town centre improvements and enhancements. However, this contribution is not necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, and therefore it cannot be treated by members as a reason for granting planning permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Coley. I'll try again. Mr. Alan Nichols. Do we have Mr. Nichols? Okay. Do we have a Mr. Nicholson speaking in favour of the application? I'd like to take a seat, Mr. Nicholson. Mr. Nicholson is speaking in favour of the application. I'm just looking at members. Councillor Bunting.
Chairman, as we only have a speaker in favour, may I test the water, please?
Are members happy to test the water with this? You happy to? Yeah? Happy with that? Okay. Mr. Nicholson, we'll give you your 3 minutes. You've come all this way, and we look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Nicholson. I'm the head of planning at Into. Barton Square is now over 10 years old and home to two popular leisure attractions, Sea Life Manchester and Legoland Discovery Centre. The retail element has been less successful, mainly due to the current planning controls. The application before you will make better use of the existing permitted floor space and adds a small element of additional space. This will enable us to improve the range of retailers, provide complementary places to eat and drink, and welcome new family leisure attractions. For the past 12 months or so, Inter has been in discussions with officers in respect to these proposals, and we've been working closely with your officers and their professional retail advisor, both at pre-application and post-submission stage, to bring forward a scheme that is appropriate both at planning policy and the technical perspective. We have also sought to engage with key stakeholders and groups during the application process to ensure the application is fully understood. As you note from the report, the application gives rise to two main planning policy considerations: whether it passes a sequential approach and whether the application will have a significant adverse impact on any defined town centre. Whilst there's been some concern expressed by stakeholders within Altrincham, both planning policy matters have been carefully and comprehensively considered by your officers and their professional advisor. Both have been found to be acceptable. There are no sequential sites that accommodate the proposal, and the impact will not be significant. However, to provide additional comfort, we have offered planning conditions that will control the operation of Barton Square going forward. These include minimum unit size restrictions, exclusion of a cinema from the scheme, and agreeing to an overall floor space cap and caps on each specific use within the scheme. We've also agreed to bring forward the previously agreed financial contributions linked to the historic planning permissions at the site, which are to be spent on enhancing your town centres. Further, it is significant that no statutory consultee has raised an objections to the application, and importantly, both the Highway Authority and Transport for Greater Manchester have raised no objection. It is also important to recognise that the development will make most efficient use of previously developed land, is a highly accessible location, and will create in the order of 370 new jobs, with additional jobs through the construction phase. We therefore have a scheme that your officers support and that will deliver significant benefits. It fully accords with national and local planning policy, and there are no technical objections that should stop its delivery. We are committed to bringing forward the scheme and investing a further £75 million in your borough. I hope the committee can support this application and endorse your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. If you'd like to return to your seat. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Chairman. May I just repeat my request to test the water now we've heard the applicant? Thank you.
I think we can do that. Are you proposing granting, Mr. Councillor Bunting? Anybody second that? Councillor Wetton. It's been moved and seconded. We grant this application. All those please show. Is unanimous. Thank you. The application has been granted. Thank you. We're going to go to page 1. That's Bowden Preparatory School for Girls, for girls sports ground, Cavendish. Do we have Miss G? Miss G, would you like to take a seat?
Just to save the member of the public the time, I'll move test the water again, if I may, Chairman.
Bear with me, Councillor Bunting. There's an introduction coming to us from Miss Coley. Just before you begin, Miss G.
Sorry, just to remind members, I have been advised by legal that we should introduce every item, particularly where members may wish to test the water. So we will do it for. We will need to do it for every item. So the Bowden Preparatory School application. This application relates to the Bowden Preparatory School for Girls school playing pitch facility on the south side of Cavendish Road. The site is located within Bowden Conservation Area, whilst the main school buildings are located within the Downs Conservation Area. A number of trees throughout the application site are subject to tree preservation orders. Planning permission is sought for the remodelling and upgrading of the existing sports pitch facility. The main works proposed include the formation of 2 split-level synthetic surface playing pitches. The applicant amended their proposals, the main change being the proposal to create split-level playing pitches by excavating into the site gradient. With regards to the initial proposal to raise land levels, 36 letters of objection were received. Following receipt of amended plans and reconsultation with residents, a further 7 letters of objection have been received. The main considerations of the proposed development include impact on heritage assets and residential amenity. With regards to the assessment of heritage assets, the overall level of harm is deemed to be less than substantial and in line with paragraph 196 of the MPPF. The public benefits of the improved education facilities at the site are considered to outweigh this harm. Officers are satisfied that the proposal is acceptable in all other respects, subject to appropriate conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Coley. Councillor Bunting.
Again, Chairman, as this is an open and shut case, may I test the water?
Yeah, the microphone's on now. Ms G, there's no need for you to speak. Let's go to the vote. All those in favour of granting this application, please show. Those against, that is unanimous. Thank you, Ms G, for attending. That application has been granted. I'm going to go to page 122. That's Altrincham United Reformed Church Hall, 81 Cecil Road in Hale. Do we have Miss Payne? Miss Payne, if you'd like to take a seat. Miss Milner's going to give us an introduction before Miss Payne begins. Miss Milner.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to an Edwardian church hall attached to the main Altrincham United Reformed Church building on the north side of Cecil Road, close to the junction with Ashley Road, located within the South Hill Conservation Area. It is noted as a positive contributor within the conservation area. The proposal is to demolish non-original extensions and erect several single and two-storey extensions to the side and rear as part of converting the church hall into 9 apartments. The key issues are relating to the impact on the heritage asset, the design, impact on residential amenity, highways and parking. It comes to committee tonight as there's been more than six separate objections, and they focus mainly on the design and parking impacts. Officers are satisfied that there would be less than substantial harm on the heritage asset, and this would be outweighed by any public benefits provided by the residential accommodation to be provided on site. We are also satisfied there would be no harmful impact on the residential amenity of surrounding properties or on the highway network, and recommend approval subject to conditions. However, following further comments from our Heritage and Development Officer, we have proposed an amendment to one condition and an additional condition to secure further level of detail relating to architectural quality of the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Milner. Councillor Bunting.
Again, Chairman, at the risk of sounding like a stuck record, may I again test the water, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bunting. I'm getting nods from around the table. It's been proposed. Councillor Wetton.
I'm not against testing the water. I just want to say that I think this is a fantastic scheme. I think it makes, creates a good number of homes out of an existing building, and the design of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wetton. You'll be supporting of it. We need a second. I think we got Councillor Wetton. Yeah. Moved and seconded that we grant this application. All those in favour of granting? Those against? That is unanimous. That has been granted. Thank you for your time, Ms Payne. We're going to go to page 231. That's 43 Dunham Road. Do we have Mr Jeffrey? Mr Jeffrey, would like to take a seat? Mr Jeffrey speak in favour of this application. Mr Jeffrey, do we need an introduction? Ms Milner's going to give us an introduction. Thank you.
This application is the conversion of a two-storey detached dwelling house with accommodation within the basement, located off Dunham Road, within the Deversdale Conservation Area. The application proposes the conversion of the existing attached garage and extension of this garage to provide habitable accommodation. There would also be the remodelling of a subterranean patio area with associated soft landscaping, a fully glazed single-storey rear extension to the main property at basement level, the erection of an open-sided carport for 3 vehicles, as well as changes to the landscaping to the front of the property, including a water feature, and changes to landscaping throughout the site and boundary treatment. Whilst objections have been received from 13 properties locally, following amendments and reconsultation, officers are confident that the proposals will not harm the heritage asset of the designated Deversdale Conservation Area, and also given the proximity to surrounding properties, do not consider there to be any negative impact on residential amenity, and consider that the proposals are of an appropriate design for the building.
Thank you, Ms Milner. Councillor Bunting.
Once again, Chairman, may I test the water, please?
I'm getting nods of approval from around the tables. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wetton, it's been proposed that we grant this application. All those in favour of granting? Those against? That is unanimous. Thank you for your time. Mr. Jeffrey, thank you. Yeah. Okay, we're going to go to page 197. That's 90 Harley Road in Sale, and Miss Milner's going to give us an introduction.
This application relates to a two-storey mid-terrace dwelling house on the east side of Harley Road. Planning permission is sought for the erection of a ground and first floor rear extension with a proposed increase to the existing dormer. Key considerations relate to the design of the dwelling, impact on design of dwelling and the wider area, and impact on amenity to surrounding occupiers. There were a substantial amount of objections to the original scheme. However, that was substantially amended during the application. Officers are now fully in support of the application and consider there to be no harmful impacts on design or amenity.
Okay, any members wish to comment? Councillor Bunting.
Vessel Water, please, Chairman.
Moved and seconded that we grant this application. All those in favour, please show. Councillor Wetton. All those in favour, please show. Those against? That is unanimous. That application has been granted. Page 206, that's 67 Langham Road in Bowden. There's no speakers for this item. Do we need an introduction? We do need an introduction from Miss Milner.
This application relates to a two-storey cottage accessed off Langham Road. The proposal is for the retention of a triangular window within the apex of the rear gable at first floor level. The window matches the windows and the doors within the rear elevation of a previously approved application from 2016. The application is referred to members because Councillor Sharp lives adjacent to the property. The window is already in situ, and therefore this application is for the retention of the window. Whilst it is in the conservation area, the Bowden conservation area, and it proposes a new window, officers do not consider there to be any harmful impact on the character of the conservation area or any impact on approval, but there are no conditions because the window is in situ, and therefore any changes to what has already been done would require further planning permission. So it's just a recommendation.
Thank you, Miss Milner. Anybody wish to comment? Councillor Dr. Barclay.
Thank you, Chairman. As we all know, Councillor Sharp, do you think we need to make a blanket declaration of interest?
I'm sure that's right. A blanket declaration from everybody. Any other comments? Councillor Bunting.
I bet you can't see this one coming. May I test the water, please, Chairman?
For that, Councillor Carey. Moved and seconded that we grant this. All those in favour, please show. And those against? I think that's unanimous.
900 Chester Road.
900 Chester Road. This is my my bit. So I'm going to pass over to Councillor Williams, who's going to chair while I speak to this application.
Okay, if we turn to page 112 in the reports pack, is it Ms. Milner giving the... Yeah, Ms. Milner wants to introduce and Lawrence take your chair.
This application relates to a mid-terrace property on Chester Road, located within a parade of commercial units which forms a local centre within Gorse Hill. The currently vacant ground floor unit was previously in use as an A1 retail shop, with residential accommodation within the first and second floors. Planning permission is sought for the change of use of the ground floor to an A5 hot food takeaway, with the upper floors used for storage and office space. The application also proposes the provision of a flue to the rear of the property to provide extraction for the takeaway use. The application has been called to committee by Councillor Walsh, who wishes to object to the scheme on the grounds that there are a high number of takeaways already within the parade and a short number of shops. The impact and operation of takeaways with regards to noise, disturbance, odour, litter and pollution of the drainage system. In addition, we have received 8 further objections from 4 different addresses since the committee agenda was printed. The main objections echo those of Councillor Walsh and highlight the existing problem with vermin in the area. The main consideration of the application is on the vitality and viability of the parade, with the loss of the A1 to the change of A5, the design of the flue and the impact this would have on amenity of surrounding occupiers in relation to noise and odour, and the impact on the highway network. Officers do recognise there is a high proportion of A5 units along the parade, but consider that the change of use would be acceptable and not harm the parade as a whole, and that do not consider it a reason to warrant refusal. And subject to appropriate conditions recommended by our colleagues in environmental health, that the flue would be of an acceptable standard and not harm the amenity of adjoining neighbours.
Thank you, Ms Milner. Lawrence, you have 5 minutes if you want to turn your microphone on. Okay.
Thank you. So I represent that area, and I know this area very well. And we've discussed takeaways in the past on this site. Now, the neighbours are concerned about disturbance at night time. The takeaways don't stick to their allotted hours. So where it says they're closing at 12, they're closing at 1, very often they're open until 4 o'clock in the morning. It's a contest who can stay open the latest. People coming home late at night on buses and things. It does disturb the neighbours. And I've stood outside, sad person that I am, till 2 and 3 in the morning on Milton Road looking at these takeaways open. And that's the problem that the officers have got to take some enforcement action against them. Who's going to stand out there and gather evidence? So we've got a problem with takeaways staying open. There are residential flats around about these takeaways, and indeed the new takeaway. And I don't think it's fair for those residents to suffer for the sake of another takeaway. With respect, they don't clear away the litter as well as they should do. They don't service the building as well as they should do. And it does cause problems. When I looked at the report, it talked about this takeaway would make the shops at the front, 41% of them would be takeaways. That actually is not the case. There's 9 other businesses and there's 2 office type establishments. One of them, Premier Care, is actually going in April. They are leaving. And I've been into them and said, what can I do as a local councillor to help you to stay? And basically they've told me they've outgrown the premises, so they will not be there. There's another shop or an office. It used to be the violin shop, those of you who've been around a bit longer. And that's up to be let for an office use. They can't let that establishment, and the new takeaway is going to go next door to it. And my worry is, if we open another takeaway, that business, that site won't get won't get an office moving in, because people don't want to work in an office right next door to a takeaway. And the barber shop has threatened me that he said he will go if the takeaway opens. Perhaps that's blackmail, but that's how much they're concerned about it. We want to keep those businesses there. So what I'm heading towards now is the vitality of the parade. 9 takeaways at present, but there will be with this one. 2 of them, as far as I'm aware, are closed. They're not doing well. And so the residents have got the concerns about the litter, the disturbance, the noise, the servicing, pouring oils down. It has to be said, it's not a nice thing to say. Pouring waste oils down in the gullies, in the entries. They do it, but we've had to clear it a few times. Those are issues, and I'm sure our officers will advise that we can't, or you can't reject an application because of that. But I'm talking about the vitality of the parade. I genuinely think another takeaway will spoil the vitality of that parade. And ask you to consider that. It will be 50%, and 2 of those are closed. Gorse Hill, we want it to get a lift, and I don't think it's going to get a lift from this takeaway. I think I've said enough now, Chair, and I'll leave while you discuss the item, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Bunting, you indicated that you want to open the debate.
No, not this time. Not this time. I can appreciate where Councillor Walsh is coming from in terms of the fact that he's obviously been contacted with residents. He's concerned for the future prospects of the area, but I can't agree with his conclusions. I accept that there are already numerous takeaways in that area, and but it's an area that tends to attract that because you do tend to get sort of a run of takeaway. So if someone wants to go for a takeaway, they'll go to that particular area to get one. And I genuinely don't feel that an additional takeaway will cause any kind of substantial harm to the vitality of that area. If anything, it just builds on the reputation that that place will have for being an area that you can get food from, and people will obviously go there for using that. So it'll generally help the those takeaways that get, I guess, sort of a collaborative benefit from doing that. In terms of many of the problems that Councillor Walsh raises, such as takeaways staying open far too late, having a contest who can stay open the latest. Well, that's a matter for enforcement of existing regulations. I don't think it's very fair to say that this one should be refused on the ground that other takeaways are breaching their planning regulations. If that is happening, well, then obviously that would be a matter for enforcement rather than a matter of refusing an additional takeaway. In the same way as things like the oil being poured down the drain outside the shop, again, that will probably be more a matter for environmental health and the and for the utility companies to deal with rather than for planning. So whilst I can see Councillor Walsh's concerns, I don't think that this individual takeaway adding to the stock of takeaways that are already there will cause a significant harm. And I think many of the problems he has mentioned in his representation to us, whilst they are a genuine concern and whilst they need to be dealt with, this is not the appropriate context for dealing with them. They are matters for either planning, for either enforcement or environmental health or possibly licensing issues, depending upon what's staying open too long. So for those reasons, Chairman, I will be voting in favour of Officer recommendation, i.e. to grant the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are we taking that as you proposing the?
Yes, Chairman.
Councillor Patel, you indicated.
Councillor Walsh here, but I mean, it's a question really, is impact on vitality a genuine planning reason to refuse? And is there a concept of any sort of saturation policy in terms of food takeaways?
So vitality and viability of centres, commercial centres, is a planning consideration, and we do have policy on local centres in our core strategy, which is W2.9 and W2.10, and they do say that the focus will be on convenience and retail facilities to meet local needs. But what we don't have is a threshold for where that tips the balance. We also need to look at the wider area and kind of say, would this tip the vitality of the wider area and not just the parade to be harmful? And whilst there are 9 takeaways, there has been a shift away from A1. We've also got to recognise that there has been high vacancy rates, and therefore the demand for that use within the area. But the key point is we don't have a specified percentage of A1 that we seek to retain that would allow us the kind of maybe the weight to say we're at that tipping point. We have to take it kind of on a more general approach and kind of look at the individual parade and say, do we need A1 here? Would it be harmful for another takeaway? And we've considered that on balance. No, it would be acceptable here.
Just to follow up, is there any, it's a question really for future, scope for some sort of detailed sort of plan-led work here in Gorse Hill, especially in light of the UA 92 building, to sort of protect this growing residential area from this sort of development?
There is an intention through the Trafford local plan to bring forward more specific guidance on hot food takeaways to take into account public health impacts as well. So yes, that probably will come forward in the future. Quite what form that will take, I don't think we can say just at this time.
Councillor Patel, have you got anything further? No. Councillor Dr. Bartley.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand Councillor Walsh's concerns. A very dedicated councillor. I always take very seriously whenever he raises concerns about planning matters. But it does have all the officer recommendation, and I do think it's a little bit unfair to be accusing a new premises that's not even opened of breaching the conditions when, in fact, we haven't even established it as something that we're approving just yet. So it's jumping the gun a little bit. We do have environmental health and we have enforcement to deal with all of those issues. So as much as I do take heed of whatever Councillor Walsh says, I will be supporting the application.
Sorry, are there any other members looking to speak? No.
The recommendation is to approve with conditions. Could we have these conditions here this evening, or to satisfy Councillor Walsh in terms of his concerns?
Ms. Lefevre was just talking about the conditions surrounding enforcement as well.
No, I mean, obviously that doesn't apply to in respect to this particular application. There are conditions proposed for this, which would restrict the opening hours on this particular application, and they're quite relatively early for a takeaway. I think it's 11 in the week, and I think what I was just talking to Chair about was the fact that there's been a suggestion that there is a regular breach of the conditions for other takeaways in that area, and it's a question of whether we should be looking into that a bit more actively if there is an issue there, because if they are staying open very long beyond the times that they have conditions that are set for their opening, we should be doing something about that. So that's what I was going to suggest.
Does that answer what you were questioning there, Councillor?
To fruition as yet. Am I right in saying that it is something that is being proposed? No? Yeah. It's not happening. It has not happened yet, is it? Or not happening?
It's before us for consideration tonight, yeah.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ms. Milner.
I'd also like to clarify to members that we do have a new enforcement team, which is now staffed with 3 dedicated officers to enforcement problems, and we can raise matters such as this with them. Previously, we didn't have the dedicated in-house enforcement within the planning team, and now we do. So we can minute this and raise it with them directly to look at these units that are abusing their current planning permissions, or indeed work with our colleagues within licensing and environmental health to also alert them to the other breaches that are taking place, which, whilst beyond the planning system, may be within other departments within the council.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Is there anyone else looking to speak? So the application, as I understand it, has been proposed by Councillor Bunting. Is anyone looking to second the application to grant? Thank you, Councillor Wen. The application has been moved and seconded that we approve permission. All those in favour? That looks to be unanimous and therefore is approved. Councillor Wen, could you check if Lawrence is outside, please?
Okay, with no other urgent business, 20, just after 20 past 8, I declare the meeting closed. Safe journey home, everybody. Thank you.